Hello and welcome to another video about Dwarf Fortress. This is going to be a little bit different than what you normally see. This is an interview with Meph, who you may or may not have heard of. He is one of the two artists working on the graphics for the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress. So this recorded interview, the original interview, was about 15 minutes long due to a couple of pauses in between questions, but the interview itself has been cut down to just under 12 minutes. And I hope that you enjoy the interview. We talk about art, we talk about workflow, and we talk about going from being a prolific modder to working on the game itself. Hope you enjoy the interview, and I'll see you again at the end.
My name's Patrick. I guess the people on Bay 12 know me better as Meph.
What is your gaming background? Because, like, you know, you're Meph. You're this kind of mythical thing that just art comes out of. It just appears, and we all just kind of look at it and we're like, oh, look at this, pixels. So, like, what is your gaming background? Like, what is some of the early memories you have playing games?
Well, the first game I played was Warcraft 1, still on DOS. I started quite early, and I'm a big fan of strategy games and simulations and roleplay games. So all the old like Baldur's Gate and pixel arty games, indie games, I'm quite a big fan of.
So how did you go from like a lot of those older PC and RPG stuff? How did you find Dwarf Fortress originally?
I was having some downtime in Argentina. I was traveling there and I had a crappy laptop with me. And I was looking for something interesting to play that runs on a machine that's not that good. Turns out Dwarf Fortress requires a lot of CPU power, otherwise your frame rate goes to hell. So the first mod I did for it was also to improve the frame rate.
How did you get started modding, and like how easy was it to mod the game initially, and like how did you eventually end up creating masterwork?
Well, obviously Dwarf Fortress is not complex enough, right? So I was playing a mod called Genesis by Dion, and that introduced me to modding a little bit. And then I first wrote accelerated DF, and then I started modding, and I noticed, oh hey, what people want is options. Like half of the people, they want standardized materials to make the game easier, and the other half wants, 100 more metals and 500 more trees. But you can't write a mod that has both. So I adapted the then lazy new pack launcher. I asked the author for the source code, and I adapted it to install and deinstall parts of the mod so that people have settings, and that became quite popular. And then other modders asked me, hey, can you put this in there as well? And it just grew and grew and grew. Like the old 34.11 version of Masterwork is maybe 5 times as large as the regular game. The current Masterwork is a bit smaller, and let's see what happens with steamdf Masterwork.
When were you approached to go from being, a third-party modder to actually working on the game itself?
In fall 2018, I got an email just completely out of the blue. Like, hi, we would like to talk to you about gaming, but you have to sign an NDA first, and we can't tell you what it's about.
Yeah, that definitely sounds how the games industry goes. It's like, hey, here's information, but you can't talk about anything until stuff gets released. So I guess now the next question is just like, what is it like working with Bay 12 Games and kitfox on Dwarf Fortress?
It's been an overall great experience. It's the first time I work in the gaming industry. I usually do expeditions and sports sponsors, and doing something creative that has a lot of mental process behind it is fun, which is also why I started modding, because it's a creative outlet. And Tarn has been absolutely fantastic. He gives us so much freedom and goes along with most of the ideas we post. And then kitfox, the publisher, they are limited a bit on the amount of sprites we can do. Like if we suggest something that takes 10,000 extra sprites, they are more likely to say, maybe take it easy and wait till after the release. Maybe we can do this further on. But they're not giving any deadlines or, oh, this has to be this design. It's very open. Like I think we can do pretty much what we want. Since I started working with Tarn and kitfox, I think I've been on 3 big trips where I was unavailable for several months, and that was no problem at all.
So since you've been working on the Steam version, has it been kind of difficult to separate the art style in the Steam version from your own personal tile sets that are quite popular within the like current Dwarf Fortress community within the forums and everybody who uses Masterwork. Is it kind of difficult to kind of separate those two styles, or is that just something that you've been working with and are used to now?
Yes and no. Very early on, Mike Mayday decided on the more friendly pastel colored style. It's more approachable and less busy on the screen. Personally, I'm more a fan of something gritty or realistic. I'm also not a trained artist. So when he says, oh, due to color theory, we should do this, then I go along with it. And
Yeah.
so early on, we decided that he's the creative lead and that I will create sprites in his style. Sometimes I push for some ideas. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But anything I want to do in addition to this friendly steamdf style, I can do on my own and then publish on Bay 12 for Steam as a modder anyway for free. That's my plan. I already have a set of a few mods and graphical additions for the Steam Dwarf Fortress that I can't release because it's not released yet.
Now, since you mentioned Mike Mayday, which portion of the artwork is primarily yours, or is it very much a kind of a collaborative work?
At the beginning, we had specific topics for each one, like, oh yeah, I know more about the UI, or hey, the dwarves are super important, and so Mike should design them first. But it turned out to be very fluid, where we throw ideas at each other, and Mike does input the quality, and I input the quantity, is what I usually say. Like he draws 50 creatures, then I can see the design and the art style, and I can do the other 150 and the variants, like the children, the undead, the corpses, the animal person, the giant animals, and so on. That takes a lot of time of his back too, so he can work on the original designs for other things. And then there's also the part where if there is a deep game or raw or modding knowledge required, I'm usually the one doing those, like delve into the text files and actually figure out how the system could work. Like, for example, the statues that were posted. That wasn't Tan's idea. He was quite surprised when I suggested that we could actually do this.
You mentioned earlier that you have a lot of freedom. So, what's the weirdest thing you've had to draw so far?
It is a good question. Like some of the randomly generated creature or creature parts, then probably the guts. If you have a gravely injured dwarf, his guts might hang out and drag behind him. So we needed two tiles for this, for every cardinal direction. And yeah, I mean, Dwarf Fortress is a weird game. For example, for the statues, they have every single gem shape. So you have a pearl cut gem, and then you have to draw this in a 32 times 32 tile. I drew 23 of those, just different gem cuts. It's not something I expected. Or the 85-ish different eggs.
Sounds like a hell of a little puzzle trying to fit that many pixels into such a small tile.
Well, you have 1,024 pixels in total to work with, but no, I mean, mostly it's fun. It's like trying something out, or, oh, well, I'll just do this and post it and then see if they even want it.
So, what has been some challenges when working on this Steam version? Like, has there been anything that's really kind of tripped up or slowed you guys down so far, or has it just been kind of getting everything finished over time?
Making sprites is easy. Making sprites that are adapted by the game and then given a context and a recolor, and maybe there are three other sprites that appear on the same tile, like a floor with a plant and a dwarf is standing on it and he's wearing 25 different types of equipment, and then it still has to look readable. This is challenging. I think getting dwarfs with equipment and dwarfs that show the profession and the labor and the skill level, this is almost impossible to do all at the same time. So we had to do, for example, the clothing, but then recolor it based on profession, even if it's not dyed. And then we don't show the skill level, so you have to still look at them. Otherwise, I think it's merging Mike's style and my style, and it has been a project over several years now. So the sprites from the beginning might look a little bit different from the sprites at the end. I guess before the release, when everything is finished, we have to go over everything and equalize it a little bit, see that the sprites fit well once everything is in the game. Otherwise, it's more easy to test things if the code is done. Like if Tarn has written the identifiers and we can add the sprites to the game and can see them and interact with them and test it. If we just draw them without context in Photoshop, they might not work that well. So yeah, it's always good to make like a placeholder first, then Tarn puts it in the game, then we have a look, and then we improve the sprites.
So currently, mods for Dwarf Fortress are kind of relegated to the forums, and it's like I see a lot of people frequently in my streams and in comments that are always asking, like, what's the modding community like? Because more or less they can't find it. You have to go to the Bay 12 forums, you have to make an account, you have to wait for 24 hours to be able to post, and a lot of people find it difficult to navigate forums like that in the modern era when we have things like Reddit. How much do you think the Steam version will affect the modding community? And do you think they'll adopt it, I guess, is kind of the other part of that?
I think there will be a lot more mods coming up because there will be a lot more players. There will be the issue that old mods will have to be updated to the Steam version, and some of the raw files and graphics are of course different now. So there will be a lot of work to update from, for example, updating Masterwork to the steamdf version will be a nightmare, but most of the smaller mods should work just fine. I would say it would benefit if it migrates from Bay 12 a little bit to the Steam Workshop, as well as maybe Nexus, if you're familiar with it. Website for hosting mods for all types of games.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Nexus. I used it back in the day to mod Skyrim a whole bunch.
Yeah. I've always thought maybe I should create a page for Dwarf Fortress there and upload some mods. Now that I said it on the interview, I probably have to do it because otherwise someone else does it.
I could always cut it out if you want, but if you want me to leave it in there, I can.
No. It's perfectly fine. I mean, if you create a page there, you're not the owner and you're not an admin or something. It exists, so everyone can use it. I'm sure it will spring up within a day after you post this. If not, I'll make it.
Running to the ends of my questions now, and I guess all I really have to say now is there anything specific you'd like to point people towards? Maybe where they can find Masterwork Dwarf Fortress for the current versions, or where they can find other things that you've worked on? Just if you have anything you'd like to shout out or mention, now's where you can do that.
And I think most people that watch YouTube videos about Dwarf Fortress are already familiar with the modding and the tile sets, so no, I'm good. I do have a website, worldbicyclist.com, which I haven't updated in ages because COVID is awesome and I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me about art for the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress, and thank you very much for doing this interview.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Thank you very much for sitting around and listening to that interview. If you enjoyed it and would like to see more like it, I have 3 interviews now with Tarn Adams, as well as some other interviews on this channel that you may have missed. There's one with Hugh Millward, the developer of Warsim, an interesting little ASCII kingdom management game, and also an interview with Cornell over at Chaos Forge, who is the developer of Jupiter Hell and Doom the Roguelike and Aliens the Roguelike and a couple other roguelike fan games. So if you're interested in those, links are all in the description, and there's also a bit of a playlist growing on this channel now. I don't know how much of a thing this is going to become on this channel. If people like it and support it, I'll do more of them. If not, then we'll see. I'll do them when I have time and when I have the chance, because I'm very passionate about doing this kind of reporting and these kind of interviews. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.